going to invite Sharon to come up now and talk a little bit about the work that she does and the center.
Rebecca, do you want to come up? Want to sit in the middle? So, Eleni, only these two or those two?
They should all work.
They should. Oh, okay.
You sit in the center.
You want to sit in the middle?
Would you speak right now? Yeah, you sit in the middle, Mom.
Yeah.
Then I use it in the center.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And you go to the other side.
I hope the Duke Fire Department is not going to arrest me. So thank you everyone for coming this evening. My name is Sharon Halperin, and I am director of the Holocaust Speakers Bureau, which is a part of the Center for Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights Education of North Carolina. It's quite a mouthful. The reason I lit this yellow candle is because it's traditionally lit on the eve of Yom HaShoah, on the eve of the Day of Remembrance, which is an annual event usually held in April or May. This year I believe it's May 5th, and it's a day set aside where we honor those individuals who resisted and rescued victims, but also memorialize those who did not live. I think that you are very fortunate today to hear and see Rebecca Hauser. You're probably the last generation to be able to hear and see a survivor. Your children most likely will never have this experience. So consider yourself very lucky and blessed. We have about 13 survivors, liberators, and refugees, and I'll explain in a minute what that is, in our little organization in Chapel Hill in Durham. We call people who left Europe prior to 1939 when the war broke out, we call them refugees because they left where they were being persecuted and made it to a safe haven, whether it be America or North America or South America or Palestine, which was what Israel was called back then. We collaborate with a department at the University of North Carolina called the Civic Education Consortium, and they're writing lesson plans and classroom activities that go along with the documentary that you just saw. So if a North Carolina teacher shows this video and then is looking for classroom activities, she can access these lesson plans, and she's set. She doesn't have to invest any energy in coming up with a lesson plan for the day. And we thought that there was so much material out on the internet with regard to teaching the Holocaust that a documentary like this, 30 minutes in length, broken up into chapters and then accompanied by lesson plans and activities would help the North Carolina educators. Teachers, some of them have one day to cover the Holocaust. Some have 2 weeks, and a lucky educator will have a month or a semester. But we figured if they have a week, let's say, they might want to show 2 chapters, 10 minutes, do an activity, and then have a discussion with the students. The reason we changed our name to encompass other genocides and human rights is because we don't want to just share history. We love that Rebecca is able to tell her story, but we don't want it to stop there. We want students especially to draw parallels and comparisons between the Holocaust and what's happening today around the world. Unfortunately, my generation botched things up. We said never again, and we keep seeing genocide again and again and again. And I've been wearing this green Save Darfur bracelet since 2008. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'll wear it for a while and then it'll get dealt with and there won't be any problems in Darfur or South Sudan. Well, guess what? It's still bad there. In fact, some people say it's getting worse. So I continue to wear my green bracelet. But we do want students to feel empowered to do something to make a difference. And we often get the question, what can I do? I'm one person. But I tell them, you're sitting in a classroom with 25 other students, and if you all work together, I bet you can make a difference. Write to your congressman, have a bake sale, raise $15.22 and give it to End Genocide Now. I don't care what you do. Go cook in the homeless shelter where there are refugees who are coming to North Carolina. Just care and show that you're doing something. So that in a nutshell is what we do. Our survivors go out weekly. This is my third talk this week, and I'm still giving another one tomorrow. So the survivors are amazing. They're in their 80s and 90s, and they're willing to go to classrooms and come to venues like this. So we think they're miracles, not only for having survived what they went through, but for wanting to open up their hearts again and repeatedly tell you what they went through. So it'll resonate with you and make a difference. And I'm happy to take questions about students' impressions or what kids are saying to us if you're interested, but I have a feeling you want more to hear from Rebecca. So do you want to say something, or do you want to open it up to Q&A?
I'll just talk for a second.
Okay.
I'll talk for a second. Hi, everybody. I'm Bonnie Hauser. And I want to first thank you all for coming and to thank Eleni for setting this up tonight. It's really pretty exciting. Mom retired back in June from speaking. She's been speaking for a few years. And frankly, we've been talking to students, churches, and civic groups, and the reception's been overwhelming to have kids come. And we had an 8th grader come up and say, my grandfather liberated your camp. You know, and I think if we hadn't shown up, this kid would have not engaged in that way. It was pretty amazing. She doesn't like to acknowledge it, but my mother is a rock star. And I knew growing up that she was a survivor, but didn't know what that really was. We didn't talk about it. I knew it was bad. I knew she lost everything. But we never talked about it. Again, you saw in the film, my mom talks about that she wanted to, it was time to move on. And we kind of collided with Sharon and her partner, Debbie Long, who kind of put this whole program together, and we started speaking. And that process for me was a journey. And it was a journey to learn who my mother is, learn more about her background, what she's experienced, and how brave and resilient she really is. The horror of the camps and the pain and heartbreak of coming home and not knowing that you were all that was left, that your brother, she really had hoped her brother would survive. I cannot imagine what it was like to go through that, and I'm not sure I could have endured it. She is genuinely brave. So she's here to answer your questions. And I want to just repeat something that Sharon said. You're the last generation that's going to be able to see a survivor live. My mother, anti-Semitism wanes And, it waxes and wanes. And when it does, anyone that has a background of my mother's, all of us, I think anyone who's a Jew says, oh, it's back again. It's back, so it waxes and wanes. So we would hope that you would take this as your responsibility to say, or the Holocaust deniers, right? So it's your responsibility to say, yes, it happened. Yes, I know, I witnessed it, I witnessed it. So with that, I'm going to open it. Now, one guideline, my mother is a little hard of hearing, so we may repeat your questions so that she can hear them. But, ask away. It's really a pleasure to be here with you tonight.
So we can take any questions that anyone has. If you say them and Rebecca can't hear, I'll just repeat them for her up here.
It's always hard asking the first question.
What was that?
You have to be close to me.
Okay, so I can go.
Half deaf, 3/4 deaf. I needed an interpreter. When you ask the questions, she would repeat them to me, and I will answer.
I'm wondering how being through the Holocaust affected or influenced your relationship with Judaism. Did you feel more Jewish as a result of experiencing that, or did you want nothing to do with Judaism?
So how did your experience affect your relationship with Judaism? Did you want more of it or less of it, or something?
I want everyone to be as Jewish as you feel like being, and less or more, it doesn't matter. What it matters to be human and helpful to others and helpful to yourself, and try to be positive and do the right thing instead of the wrong thing. And you as young people, you're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And you should be able to experience what I said, not for my sake, because I know it's painful for me, and it's probably is painful to you too, but just so you form some opinion what happened and what could we do today. I'm very, very concerned about Israel's survival. It has nothing but enemies surrounding them, and we have to try to understand their position. They have to survive, and they try to do anything to survive. And I want them to survive, so if anything happens to Jewish, I would like it for any nationality that suffers to have top speakers. And Israel could be the speaker for the Jews. And the Jews today, with all said and done, still suffering anti-Semitic feelings throughout the globe. And that concerns me and saddens me. So I thought, I didn't talk for years about my experience. I felt there were better speakers, and they would more articulate what they wanted to say. And it's painful, but now I'm talking for the 6 million that will never talk. And I'm trying to impress on you as the future generation not to just forget it. A lot of people forget it, and a lot of people deny it. So I am concerned, and I would like to take any questions. I didn't mean to speak as long.
Do you mind if I add something? And I'm just adding, having grown up with my mother, and just in the context of Judaism, and one of the things that she's been hammering into me is the role of Israel. And my mother was raised Orthodox, the little town of Yanina. You know, they weren't like America where we have, you know, Reformed and conservative Jews. Everybody was Orthodox in her community. They honored the Shabbos. The Jews lived in a separate part of town. And so Israel was a place, you know, she didn't come here. She had cousins that ended up in Israel. And I sit there, you know, we're all Americans, right? We're all, you know, think about it. But she said, Israel's the only place where you can go and you can live as a Jew, right? You can practice, because the customs are Jewish. You know, Saturday, they honor the Shabbos on Saturday and stuff like that. So it heightened my importance of why is Israel so important to the Jews. So I just...
Yeah, I want to also reiterate, both of my parents were Holocaust survivors. They passed away a couple years ago, but Israel was a haven in their eyes, and they believed in their hearts that if Israel existed during the Second World War, that this would not have happened, that the atrocities would somehow have been averted. I don't know if that's true, but this Zionist impression resonated with them, and it was ingrained in me. So what Rebecca's saying is what a lot of survivors feel. If Israel was around, this wouldn't have happened.
Question 2.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I guess my question is there room for forgiveness?
Is there room for forgiveness?
Forgiveness. I can't say I forgive everything that happened. There must have been a lot of Germans that they were saddened about the conditions and they didn't talk about it. Those I forgave because they probably were thinking of themselves and their safety and they did not talk. But the ones that they really, really did what they did, I do not forgive them. I'm sure they are among us in America and probably live American lives like I live an American life. But to say I forgive them unless they really are really sorry about what they did, maybe I would forgive them. But I don't know. Nobody told me that they ask my forgiveness. So I can't tell that I would forgive just carte blanche. I just forgive anyone that is sorry about it.
Last year, there was an article in the New York Times that said that the researchers at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum have uncovered evidence of over 42,500 ghettos, slave labor units, camps, the list went on. And when I read that, I'm thinking, how could a German resident have said, I didn't know what was going on? Or how could it have someone who lived in Munich right outside of Dachau and that saw the trains going full and coming back empty? How can these people say, I didn't know that was happening? So when you talk about forgiveness, you have to put it in perspective.
Well, I will forgive anybody that is really, really, really sorry about what happened and ashamed of what happened. But to say that everybody is, I don't know that it is. So I can't say I forgive everybody.
There's, in today's generation, your age, there's a story about young people who went to camp, you know the story. I don't remember. Well, it was a bunch of Germans and Jews. I think there were children of survivors or grandchildren of survivors and grandchildren of Nazis that went to a camp together. And that was, so, you know, it's generational, right? That new generations are trying to find ways to forgive. You know, the Germans have changed their laws to prevent this from happening. So it takes a while to heal.
But we were talking on the ride over here that I won't buy a German car, like BMW, Volkswagen. Well, Volkswagen now for a couple of reasons, but a Mercedes. I won't buy a German product. But if my children want to buy it, that's your business. And I think as the generations get removed from World War II and the Holocaust, more and more of these attitudes will change.
Well, my daughter buys them, and I'm very upset about it. She says, well, you can't blame everybody. I said, I don't have to kiss everybody either. I'm sure today's laws in Germany have asked for people to forgive and to be sorry about what happened, and that I'm thankful for. But the fact that there is no more anti-Semitic people in Germany, I don't believe that. With all that happened, I believe there must still be some.
Questions? Yeah.
Why didn't you tell your children about what happened to you in the Holocaust?
Well, there is a bitterness of me, as you see it coming out, and I didn't want them to live with that all their lives. I want them to be regular people with American feelings, and my husband was American. He just thought that the best thing for us to do is put the past behind you and let's live our life as it is today. But at this point, I figure they are old enough to take it.
So the experience of survivors was handled differently in every home. In my house, we spoke about the Holocaust all the time. And in junior high school, I started organizing community events because I kept seeing all these older people at these Yom HaShoah commemorations, and it bothered me back then. But it runs the gamut. Debbie Long, who Bonnie spoke about earlier, we started this organization. Her parents, they argued and fought, and they ended up getting divorced, and she grew up in a house that was not warm and welcoming, and it's because of the way they dealt with their Holocaust experiences. So it runs the gamut. Some people didn't say anything,
Okay.
and other people
You
said.
had two parents. You had two parents that they went through the same thing. My husband married me to save me of that feeling. It was an American man, and he just thought that we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
He didn't want to know. He
Yeah.
wanted me to be as normal American person as I could be.
Right. So as it just ran the gamut.
When you moved to America, how aware was the American public in general of what had happened at that point?
When you moved to America, how aware was the American public about about the Holocaust and what had happened?
Most people were very concerned about it, and they did not want to talk about it because they knew it was a sore spot in me that they didn't want to touch. And that goes for family, that they took me in their arms and they gave me a new life. They still didn't want to talk about it. They felt like I went through it, I should put it behind me and try to live a normal life. And it's not a normal life talking about it. It's painful. So at that time, it was easy for me to obey. Everybody told me to put it behind me, and I did put it behind me. But now I think before I die, I better talk.
So Mom, when you came home, what about in general? Did the American public in general?
I don't know what they knew, because I thought with the press of America that everybody knew it and I didn't need to explain it. But I found out that the press in America did not tell the whole story, nothing but the story. And I found that when I was maybe very old already. So that's one reason that made me talk, because I realized a lot of people don't know about it and some people deny it happened.
When you returned to Greece, how did so I know you had said that your community generally was Orthodox Jewish, but the people, if there were people who weren't, what was the overall reception when you did return back home after the Holocaust?
So when you went back to Yanina, what was the reception of the Jewish community, and what was the reception of the non-Jewish community? Right?
The Jewish community was ready to help each other at any way, for food, for shelter, for whatever we needed. And some, as far as the Greek community, they must have felt bad about it, but they never expressed their sorrow in words. So I can't tell for sure how they felt. So I know of some people, like an instance that I heard, that some people lived in one of the Jewish houses, and one of the Jewish survivors came, the only survivor, and he went in his basement and he found things that they were hidden there. And that woman came out crying that I told my husband to fix that basement, and he never did it, and we would have that money right now. So actually, a lot of them, they did not have the full extent of what happened.
So can I just say that Denmark stands uniquely by itself. The survivors, by the way, over 98% of the Jews were saved in Denmark. They were smuggled in fishing boats across to Sweden. And then when they came back, the reception by the people living in their homes was cordial. And there are stories of business owners who would say, "Here's the keys to your store. This belongs to you." And that's very different from what a lot of survivors report, that when they went back, their houses were occupied and nobody would give them reparations. And so Denmark, I went to visit Denmark a couple years ago because I said, I'm going to go support this country because they were wonderful after the war. But didn't you have a story about your sewing machine?
Yes. They gave us a list of what they took out of our homes, what they took out of our stores, and they presented it to us. And in my home, they said they took 2 sewing machines. And I inquired if I could get one of the sewing machines. They wanted to know what was the number of the machine. For
like
me
the serial number? Like you're going to know the serial number?
And they didn't try or do anything to find out anything. I didn't have the number. The truth is that they came a lot of refugees from Albania that they were at war at that time, and they did give to those refugees a lot of things that they took from the Jews. So apparently they didn't want to go to anybody and ask back for the machine.
Interesting.
First of all, thank you so much for coming again. I think we all feel so blessed to have you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you kept your humanity when you were in Germany.
How did you keep your humanity? Now you heard, I'm sorry, and you heard the thank you, right? Did you
I didn't hear it very good.
But it was a genuine thank you for coming, and Phil was blessed that you got that, okay. And yes, how did you keep your humanity while you're in the camps?
You have to. There is nothing you could do. You are a robot. They tell you where they're going to give you a piece of bread, and they tell you when you're going to work. And they had really prisoners with some connections that they were supervising us at work to make us go faster and make sure that we don't sit around or anything like that. Those were prisoners. Maybe it was the gypsies, maybe they were from how they had the connections to be in charge of us. The Germans stood with their rifle on their dog, never touched us, never spoke to us. To me, anyhow. Other people could have different experiences, but my experience was such that I didn't see it around the Germans doing anything to us. They had the supervisors supervise, and they were really prisoners as well.
Did you do anything with other prisoners? Did you do anything to support each other or to?
Tell about when you hurt your hand.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good story.
Well, we were always hungry because we had a slice of bread with a bite of cheese at night, and that was the only salad food we had. It was coffee in the morning and soup for lunch. That was almost like not salad enough to so we were always hungry. And one of my friends landed a job in a place where they took potatoes from one place to another place. They had it in hand wagons. One was holding the front, the other one was holding the back, to relocate the potatoes. And she was happy because she could eat potatoes all day long, and she couldn't bring anything with her because they didn't want anybody to know that. She asked me if I would like to go with her. And I was excited. Next day I went with her, and we are doing this. By the way, she was bigger and stronger than I was. I didn't realize that. So when I went and started with those potatoes, they were so heavy that when we had to throw them where we needed to throw them, I threw my hand with it, and my hand got stuck and very painful, and black and blue, and no blood. And everybody was putting me in the middle of the line, so the Germans wouldn't see that my arm was so hurt, because they probably would take me to the crematorium. So they made sure that there was no place in the end that they could see it. And they just were surrounding me to the point that nobody would notice my hand. At the time, I was supposed to be digging and shoveling, and I couldn't possibly do, especially with them, anybody seeing it. So there was a lot of haze it was just where we used to work was a big plain ground, and had some hay here and there. So as small as I am, I made myself even smaller, and I went and hid in that behind that hay for a couple of weeks, and that hand was not so noticeable.
So that was pretty human. That was pretty.
But they did help me. Even if I had to be in the line getting bread or whatever, they surrounding me so I wouldn't be noticed.
Question?
Any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering, how do you see life differently after what has happened?
How do you see life differently after what has happened? I mean, based on her experience, or based on her experience coming home, or because there's so much of that. It's a pretty big
perspective that she had maybe changed somehow. Right now, I was just wondering, maybe there's, it changed, and in what way it changed.
from the camp, from
That's
the
right, yes.
from the. So how do you see the experience of being in the camp? How did that change you? And did it change you? And if it did, how did it change you?
It changed me to the point that I recognize more suffering, and I believe that we haven't conquered that hate that exists in the world, and we haven't conquered anything. And I'm hoping to you, as a new generation, to really think about it and maybe be more teaching the masses of how to behave, and the leaders to think about when they do things, to think about it and do the right thing. And the new generation, if you spread the word, maybe they will do it. I don't think I'll be alive old enough to see it, but I'm hoping it will happen.
I just want to add, perspective is an interesting thing. So when my mom and I met Sharon, my mother, this whole thing, I don't know if you picked it up from the story, but here she is, they get off the train to Auschwitz, they separate the men and the women, and her mother goes on the line to ride to the showers, and she goes on the walking line. And her mother's really upset that her daughter is going off to the walking line. And it wasn't until she got back to the barracks that she realized that her mother had been taken to a crematorium. It's hard to imagine. They really thought they were going to the showers. For my mother, that was it was an experience of guilt, that she defied her mother. And then I remember when we were talking to Sharon and Debbie, and they said, well, that action is what saved your life. And certainly your mother would have wanted you to save your life, right? I mean, if your mother had the choice, she would make the choice to defy me, right? I mean, if she knew the outcome. So it's an interesting perspective. And I like to tell, it doesn't show up in the film, my mother spent 2 weeks on a train to Auschwitz, but she also, when she came to America, she came on the maiden voyage of a luxury cruise ship. So I like those kind of bookends because it opened up, and I think there's a thing of having coming to America and given, it's hard to imagine for me, now that I really understand the story, to come out of an experience like Auschwitz, to come out of an experience of losing everything, start a new life, and have the things line up. And her uncle that lived here was well off, so he was able to bring her here. But she was able to have a real life and a family and something that I think she's a great grandmother. I mean, it really. So I understand it. There's this question about how it changed you, but also those experiences also were.
Well, I have an advice to my children all the time. I say, stay well, do well, and enjoy. And if you do well, usually you enjoy. And when you are negative, it's terrible. And I decided I'm not going to be negative all my life. I still have something that comes out that is not positive, but I try to stay positive. Even if that hurts sometimes, stay positive.
That's a trait that a number of our survivors have. They're optimistic and they practice positivity. You can see it when they speak to students. It just comes through. Maybe that's what kept them going. Any more questions? Comments?
I think that's a good note to end on.